Carlos Nelson with Cascade Media Group. And today we have one of our past guests on, General Arnold Gordon-Bray. How you doing this afternoon, General?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much. Appreciate you reaching out to me. And it's good to be back talking to folks in the Kansas City area.
Want to talk to you a little bit about the state of America right now, how you see it.
You know, that's a huge question. But the reality is first of all, you know me, I'm optimistic. I think we are part of a vision, and I think we are part of a process. America is a dream. It's a process, and the process right now where we stand, we've had a few years of leaders who challenged what has preceded the making of this nation. And in that process, a lot of old feelings have been awakened. A lot of processes that have allowed us to mature have been forgotten. And I'll talk about two of them, if I may. This is a nation that had a vision where all men are created equal. That was unprecedented in truth, especially after the idea of chattel slavery started to exist, because the world became split between the hue of a person's skin was allowed to distinguish who they were, especially in the world that was being made under the British colony. Lighter skin was allowed to be perceived as better. The wars that we fought started to show that kind of division. And as more people got smarter about recognizing that the vision of this nation was right, some people rejected it. We fought a war in this nation that was principally around the idea that slavery was inhumane. But if you look at the 400 years it took to make people to start to see themselves as less than, that same process was being made so that others would feel they were better than. And so when all of the amendments to our Constitution, the Civil Rights Act, that were being enforced by law took place, some people's families didn't buy into that. Some people didn't buy into that. And this is literally those who are being repressed and those who are oppressing. So when all of a sudden you let these feelings out of the hat, you start to see them act out. You see kids letting those feelings show up. I mean, the folks that use the N-word, they don't realize they're not letting go of that past. Because, you know, I don't know about you, but I don't use the N-word. Doesn't come out of my mouth. Don't let folks use it, because when I was coming up, I mean, like one folks, like Richard Pryor said, my knife would open up by itself. For me, it would make me feel some type of way. And even though it's folks in music have bought it, it's a different era. Well, now in the past few years, you got other folks who are still trying to elevate those emotions. So that part is now being expressed in different ways. It's manifesting itself with a young man who believes he's being outed. He's being left out of this new world because his skin isn't dark enough. When the world is starting to brown, to tan, because people, men and women, are starting to get together because the laws. You got to keep it in mind, up until 1972, it was illegal in Virginia for a person of color to marry someone who wasn't. If you look at the NBA basketball players right now, you're definitely seeing the blending of America played on screen. So then you go to the second part. We also learned You're right there in Kansas City. Go west out to Dodge City. Dodge City and Wichita, Kansas. Those were two of the most rowdy places in the making of America. And the reason why is because, one, everybody had a gun. Everybody had a gun. And it was because people believed that, one, I need to have it for protection. And that's a legitimate concern, personal protection. But as the law started to establish itself, people found less of a need to walk around and routinely have to protect themselves with a gun because there was law. Folks will reference that Second Amendment. The Second Amendment was part of a constitutional amendment because the Congress was told that they would have the power to declare war and they'd have the power to be able to prosecute war, and they were given that responsibility. So they said, wait a minute, let's fix this a little bit. Let's tell everybody until we can get an army, until we can raise an army, let's do this. Let's tell everybody that they can maintain an army until we can get together and have an organized militia, because we got time. And we'll keep a navy, we'll maintain a navy just to protect our shores. And so we'll have time to raise that army. And so everybody could protect themselves. And they still have the right to protect their individual places. Well, that was 1787. Since then, and by the way, at that time, there was only about 170 active duty Army soldiers at that time. There was roughly 700,000 reservists that were across the country. But that's all you had, about 170. There was no Marine Corps and nothing else. And of course, nobody could fly. So they still toss those ideas out and they keep talking about it, but those are people who, and Steve Kerr said it best this morning, he says, we've got to get leaders who are willing to stand up and talk about it, because that's what you offer. So the state of America, I think the state of America it's going to be okay, but we got some heavy bumps to go across. And if you add the external influences of people like Putin and others who are trying to keep us disrupted, people who are being allowed to invade our space because they don't like it. What we represent is something that's very special. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said it best. We are the world's great experiment. You know, and to put that in context, like I said, think about this. France, all the other major powers of the country, France, the UK, Germany, all of them used to speak they spoke the same language, they practiced the same basic faiths, and they were relatively homogeneous, and they all looked alike. We have done something very special here. What we are doing is very special here, and everybody in the world is looking up to us because of it, except us sometimes, because we don't look at how far we came. We're one of the few democracies, in fact, one of the few governments that have survived this long. You hear people every now and then point to places like Germany. They've only been a country since 1864, and we've seen what happened to them since then. The UK is a monarchy. They've gone through significant transitions of trying to wean themselves of this idea that there are people born to God, born by God, told to lead by God. You know, one of the greatest things I pulled out of a book called 1776 was the writings of Cornwallis when he was attacking America. He said, why are the Americans fighting us? Don't they realize they're fighting God de facto through George? We're different, we're special. So I'm not worried about America writ large. I am concerned about people who have not made the commitment to who we're supposed to be. I'm worried about people, my people, who don't take ownership of the space that they have for others. In other words, you know, I tell everybody, if someone met you and you told them that you knew me, I would feel pretty comfortable coming behind you. And I would hope vice versa. But right now, there's a selfishness amongst us where we don't think that I have to I've got to watch myself because you're coming behind me. That's us. And it's worse outside of us. You know, some of the other minority groups, you know, we always talk about how the Jewish population, how that's a close-knit grouping of people. We talk about other minorities and how they cluster. Well, they cluster because there's ownership. And sometimes we cluster, but we don't have the other part, which is ownership, which is, by the way, an antithesis of who we used to be, because we were tribal too. The difference is that you had to kind of know your tribe. But in this country, it's very different. I don't know if that's too much or what, but I hope it gives you, first of all, I'm optimistic, I'm cautious, but I think the way forward is the one that we have to be unified in our discussions, and we have to also be authentic.
I would concur to a degree that what I feel you said, that we can't see the forest for the trees a lot of times. We've come a long way, and because we're right up on the situation, we really can't gauge. You've always been positive. You see the glass half full. I'm one that sees the glass most of the time half empty, but you need both parts to make things work. Let's talk about where you're at in your career and your life. And off camera, we talked about what you were doing with the HBCUs. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, there are about 15 or 16 different things that I actually do since I've retired, but they're collectively about the same thing. You know, I'm pretty consistent. I have a faith in the nation. I have a faith in what we got to do, but at the same time, I realize it doesn't happen by magic. It takes people who are willing to commit themselves, and sometimes you do it because it matters to you. Sometimes because people see it in you, and you do things, and you get paid to do it. I have combinations of those things. I do a lot with various community actions, from assisting with the blind to working with folks who with minority groups. In fact, I even work with the Steel Esteem Village in Kansas City, and William Wells and that crew that are just absolutely doing gangbusters work down there on Paseo and 18th, but 14th. But the reality is that the other things that I do, that I've got to help our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and I do that sometimes through some of the HBCUs. Specifically, there are ROTC programs. I call ROTC a teleporter for people's lives, because becoming an officer makes you automatically have to start to deal with and work with executives. So I work with high schools, especially in the Halifax County of North Carolina, helping to establish leadership schools inside leadership programs inside the high schools there. I'm on the aviation board at the Elizabeth City State University. I work with I'm a trustee at North Carolina Wesleyan University here in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. And most recently, I have signed on as an advisor and director at the Fayetteville State University, part of the University of North Carolina system, down in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And in all of these different venues, there's a thread, because there's that idea that if we can allow our military, especially here in Fayetteville and southeastern North Carolina, where, excuse me, previously named Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty, exists. You've got the largest population of military in the country, and it's literally just under 6 miles from Fayetteville State University. That's a natural linkage to be able to leverage both the population and the talent that exists at that university with the mission and capabilities of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and the opportunities it provides. So Dr. Allison and I, the chancellor at the university, see that as a place that we have to expand the opportunities for military. And for me, it's wonderful, because he has two specific programs that are powerful and need to be expanded. One is a center for advanced analytics. The other one is working with Homeland Security and national defense, whereby we can have both degrees as well as certifications to assist members of the population into careers in things like cyber at an HBCU. That gives you that option that when you and I were coming up, you were looking for, is it going to be good academics? Is it going to be resourced? Well, we're getting to that point now where we're getting all the resources. You can make a legitimate choice about how you have your college experience. And so Dr. Allison is seeing that in spades, and he wants to expand both the opportunities out there, and he's even gone beyond just the programs in the school. He's actually putting literally his money where the mouth is, whereby he's a what's called a choice university in North Carolina. The Fayetteville State as well as Elizabeth City State University, whereby you can attend college for tuition in state, $500 a semester. $500 a semester.
That's big time.
And if you are active duty military, you, your spouse, and your children can attend the Fayetteville State University for free. I'm gonna say that one more time. If you are active duty, a spouse, or a dependent child, you can go to college for free tuition. And some folks will say, well, that'll demean that. No, it doesn't demean anything. As a matter of fact, it does what you and I couldn't do. We can take those spring breaks. We can go do those other things that make college, the full experience is supposed to be. So you can do that. Then they got Elizabeth City State University, which is I'm on the aviation board there, and they've got the only aviation program Eastern North Carolina, very similar to my alma mater at Central Missouri State University, whereby you got an aviation program, whereby if you complete the program, you get automatically accepted into one of the different major airlines, American Airlines and or Delta Airlines. These are programs that allow you to enter into college and you can start thinking immediately about both adventure and a long-term career. Because college is supposed to prepare those things. Well, that's what they're doing, and they're doing it in spades.
All right, I want to switch gears real quick because time is running. How do you feel the state of the Black community in the city that you're in? When I'm doing these interviews, I feel whatever's going on in most cities is going on in all of our Black communities. So, you have a little different. How do you see that from an economic, educational, and opportunity standpoint? Second part of that question, because this has, as far as I'm concerned, the solution. Do you think that we are holding our political representatives? I'm not talking about the overall society. I'm talking about the Black political representation across the board, school districts, politics, and everything. Do you think that they are being held accountable to push forward the proper legislations and so forth to move the needle forward as it relates to the laws that are governing us, that have most people of color in this bind?
Wow. You must have pulled up Rocky Mount off the internet to look at some of those issues. First of all, I'm in a city that's 60% African American, 40% Caucasian, and it vacillates in different parts of the city. So our leadership is a combination leadership. My particular ward is led as white leadership, but the city itself is tilted to the African American leadership. Uh, educationally, we've started to try to right a ship that they failed on about 7 years ago, and I've actually written against that already, and specifically they missed an opportunity with a very progressive superintendent who left and became superintendent of the year in North Carolina. He had a contract with Apple whereby he could change and keep the curriculum up to date. And he was in the process of shifting and getting the teachers behind, but they felt like they were being pushed too hard. But they don't realize that they didn't realize that one, they are the mechanism for pushing the kids to the future. And if they're being pushed, they're just getting they're getting these digital native forward. Well, they missed that, and they're now trying to get back in line with making those moves. I mentioned earlier, there are people that still hold to the past. This is a southern city, and it has all of the elements of the South that goes with it. Those who see themselves as being in the past and are trying to step forward and trying to move forward. And then there are others who are still holding on to the past like anchors. I'm going to call one name out specifically. You always punish in private, but you praise in public. There's a gentleman named Don Bullock. He's part of the Old South. But Don Bullock recognized and always has recognized that a rising tide raises all ships. And the Boys and Girls Clubs is a specific entity that has myriad programs to help elevate our youth. After school programs where kids can go to. He saw this when it was struggling for dollars. He basically went to his company and kept it afloat both by money and also providing transportation to get kids to attend. He continues to do that. Most folks don't know it, but because I'm in Kiwanis, I also see his work and I see him doing. But he represents, in my mind, someone who's leaning toward the future, trying to do the right kinds of things. The leadership that we have, a lot of them have been around for a long time. And the African-American leadership, and everything becomes specifically about their ward or about the people of color. And unfortunately, that never moves the city. In fact, it then develops an ostracization between people, because what happens is they push back or they don't spend their money. Everybody's not Don Bullock. They're not. There are some others that will provide certain things, but the reality is it's not moving forward. It's sometimes you'll see they'll even do to ostracize other African Americans. We'll fight ourselves. You'll have someone, for instance, he's running for an office, and because he didn't roll with everybody else, they call him a Tom. You see. And this is and the person I'm speaking of, without saying his name, he was a person who was getting a lot of Caucasian money to help his ministry and a part of the town to the tune of $250,000. But because he wouldn't play one side or the other hard, but in order to be reelected, he knew where it was butter. He had to adjust, and so he didn't go all the way. But he went further enough away from who he was that I thought he damaged his character a little bit in what he did. The challenges we have is that's what we do to each other. You know, we have these knife fights and everybody gets to bleeding a little bit. There's another young man that's on my council here, and he's relatively new. He's come in with a clean agenda. He has shown incredible spine about holding the line about what he believes. And sometimes he will go one direction or the other, but it is never, in my mind, I think, associated with a specific agenda, but associated with issues. That's what we have to do. Now, at a state level, generally I don't get involved in politics specifically. I've only got involved in two cases on a direct issue. One is I made it known that I thought President Trump was not a commander-in-chief. I wrote about it. I stated why. And it was never about Trump or never Trump. It was about the fact that he didn't lead from the front, didn't accept responsibility. And I thought he made a lot of mistakes with people who hurt us and did not have our interests in mind. And I think I was validated when I talked about his lack of commitment to the nation when he was willing to fracture it, willing to do all the things. And so I spoke out against that. I spoke for and have spoken for and speaking for now an African-American woman who's running for senator. And her name is former Supreme Court Justice Sherry Beasley. Justice Beasley has been a centrist. She has friends on both sides of the aisle, and as Supreme Court Justice, she looked at women's issues, she looked at minority issues, and she puts everything in kinds of context, led by her litigious beliefs as well as her spiritual beliefs, and they're consistent. Now, to anyone that's exceptionally conservative, they'll say, well, she's too progressive. If someone is excessively progressive, they'll say, well, she's not bending enough. But that's where most Americans are. And so she finds herself there, and she's a Democrat, happens to be a Democrat, but the reality is I think that's because she had to figure out where the line she get most of the support to go forward. Because you and I both know independents don't have a chance in hell of ever winning.
Yeah, that's the thing, General, that you have to really make some hard choices. I know I have to make some hard choices trying to represent the Black community, but the Black community, it has resources, but how we use them, two different things. And you really have to pivot to the majority community if you want to get financial support and get support. So it's real, especially a high-strung person like me, that you have to learn how my boy Jimmy Watts say, not to pop your umbrella, and halfway not to bite the hand that might not be feeding you all the way, but that are working with you. And what I've taken out of your conversation, the gentleman that is helping with the Boys and Girls Club, he might not have been singing that same tune years ago, but he sees the necessity that we're one community, one nation, and reaching across to do what they can do.
Yeah, I think, and I think legitimately, he was a person that was raised at a time when, you think you see the world a certain way, but all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, maybe everything I was doing wasn't right. In fact, that's almost a quote of his, but again, private conversations you don't expose, but basically it was an element of conversation that said, okay, but I know what I've got to do. And again, it predates me. His work.
So in closing, what would you have to say to our audience?
Yeah. I think I've said it actually in here. The first thing is that one, we've got to be authentic to who we are. And it doesn't matter whether you talk to me on the street or like you and I were talking back door. I'm going to be the same person. Okay. The one thing a liar can't have is a bad memory. And so I hope I'm authentic in what I've said here and what someone would say, well, this is what he would say back to us back home. Because I also know electrons go all over. I appreciate you. Thank you.
I appreciate what you just said. I had a conversation last night about that. And they were asking me, why do I say this and say that? I say, because I'm 70, and if I get the lying, I can't remember what the lie is. And, you got to be authentic. And if I'm learning some things are better unsaid. So if you feel that you can't really be authentic, just don't say nothing. And I've had to learn that the hard way. And what I would say to you, from the time I've met you, from afar, you even mentor me by what you say, how you have carried yourself and what your values are. Because I don't agree with a lot of the things that are in the United States and the predominantly white community and establishment. But without people like you serving in the armed forces and our local police and what have you, then you don't have Blacks and people that look like us to even try to pierce and start that conversation of diversity.
So one team, one fight. You a jock, you know how that works.
Yeah, right. That's right. One team, one fight. I always pull this up when I'm talking race. I'm like, if you've ever been in the service, but I haven't been in the service, but my family, you've ever been in the service, especially in a tight situation. There's no color or none of that. It's about, and it's not even about nation. It's about I'm fighting for you right next to me. And that's how sports are. As you say, I'm a jock. You know, it's about my team, my players, my family. And race has no place in that conversation.
If you ever want to remember this, just our kind of us, you know, our group of folks about our age. You play hockey?
Nope, but I'm a Rangers fan and an Island fan.
You remember how you felt in 1980 when we played the Russians?
Oh yeah.
It was magical. It was magical. When you watched us play, when we played the Russians in basketball with the Dream Team, magical moments. Because that's what happens. And do you remember in 2001, when the nation, when we watched both aisles come together, when we were struck and the Twin Towers dropped? Those are moments when people the other time when the war wasn't even intact, that made the same thing, that same feeling, was when one of the, I think it was Chavez from South America, started to talk about George Bush. Charles Rangel said, he said, Mr. Chavez, that is my president. I can talk about him, but you don't have that right. We haven't had that kind of allegiance in several years. But at the same time, I know from having met legislators from both sides of the aisle, it's there. It's there. And if they believe that they're supported by their people, we'll start to elevate. So that's what gives me that half full sensing that we'll get there. And by the way, I know some brawls and some bruises. I'm not an unrealist. I'm not a non-realist. I am realistic. I'm just hoping.
All right. Well, as we always say when we close, when you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself. Good night.
Godspeed. Thank you, man.
The program is brought to you by the Kansas City Business Association.